nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we have a few different health-related dates and milestones that we are recognizing at this meeting. Earlier this month, May 6th, was National Nurses Day, so we want to take a moment to recognize all of our wonderful nurses, including Kiki Karianis, who's one of our wonderful school nurses here in Radnor and is a member of our board. This week is, of course, this week is also National Physical Education Week. We have a wonderful phys ed and health department here at the Radnor Township schools. We've had Amy Roseland come and present to us. We also had at the, it was the March meeting for National LGBTQ Health Awareness Week. Deb Keyser came out to the presentation. She was my health teacher back in first grade, so it was very nice of her to come out. So we want to take a moment to recognize all of the wonderful work that the physical education teachers do. Probably they're the first teachers your kids ever have who are going to teach your kids to work on things in groups, and they also keep our kids active and healthy during the day. And for the most part, they're also our health teachers. They're some of the first people that teach our kids about things like nutrition and the importance of regular exercise and all of those other wonderful things. So thank you very much to all of our wonderful phys ed teachers this week. It is also National Older Americans Month. The theme for this year's theme from the NIH is Powered by Connection. So this is in recognition of the impact that relationships have on our health and well-being. So it's a reminder to, I guess, to all of the kids and young adults out there, give your grandparents a call. They won't necessarily be around forever. We still have over 100,000 World War II veterans living in the U.S., along with some real-life Rosie the Riveters of the same generation. So take a moment to make those connections. It's valuable for both generations, I would say. David, did you have, you turned your mic on, did you? All right, and then it is also Mental Health Awareness Month. This is sponsored by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So I'll just put out a reminder that 988 is the National Suicide Hotline. And then finally, although it's not on the agenda and not exactly health related, earlier this month was Mother's Day. So I do want to take a moment to recognize all of the mothers in particular. I'd give a shout out to my own mother, who's a former chairman of the Radnor Township Board of Health, and I was the first woman to serve in that position and first nurse to serve in that position. And I'm very proud of the work that she did while she was here. So happy belated Mother's Day, Mom. Just for clarification, I did also give her a call on the actual day, but wanted to give her a shout out for the work she did here as well. So the next item on the agenda is just an announcement that there is going to be an upcoming election for officers at the next meeting. I will be stepping down as chairman at the end of the June meeting. Just for clarification for everybody, it is my intention to step down as chairman. It is not my intention to step down as a member of the board immediately. The only reason for that is that there are some presentation and events that are already in the works, and maintaining my seat while some of those things still work through may be advantageous for various reasons, but I will no longer be physically in the township by the time the September meeting rolls around, so we need to have an election for a new officer before then, and then it will be at the end of the June meeting rather than at the beginning of the June meeting, just because I will have already done the agenda for the June meeting. So rather than have somebody run a meeting for an agenda that they didn't put together, it just makes more sense to have that at the end of the meeting, and would also potentially give the public to make public comment about the election for officers if any member of the public did so desire at that meeting. So that is just sort of a public notice that that is going to be coming up. Does anybody have any comment about that particular agenda item? Okay. And then the other item under organizational issues is just a reminder that next month our meeting is still going to be on a Monday, but it is a week earlier, so it's not the third Monday next month, it is the second Monday next month, which is the 10th. So just everybody please make sure to make a note of that on their calendars next month if you have it, especially on a calendar on sort of an automated thing, that next month it is not the regular date. With that, we can move on to reports, and we'll start with a report from our school board liaison. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped past the, yes, so we have the approval of the minutes, and we have 2 months worth of minutes to approve this month because we didn't approve March's minutes last month. David, were you able to get the corrections that you wanted? Okay, great. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes from either March or April before we take a vote on that? All right. So with that, I will call for a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so that was David Simmons with the motion and Lisa Duman with a second. All in favor? Aye. All right. And so the motion passes unanimously. With that, we will move on to reports, and we'll start with the report from our school board liaison, Paniota.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Well, it is almost the end of the year, and our students are ready to go, especially our seniors. They just had their prom this past weekend at the Constitution Center, and it was wonderful from what I hear. We're gearing up for graduation. We have wonderful speakers, so lots of really great celebrations to come. In terms of health, the different schools are seeing many of the same things, a lot of seasonal allergies, a lot of respiratory infections that come from that, congestion, colds, really all along the lines of seasonal allergies. 2 other small announcements. May is also Teacher Appreciation Month, and so thank you, Alex, for giving a shout out to our health and PE teachers, but a shout out to all of our Radnor teachers who I get to work with every day. They are truly incredible in what they do for our children, and I am always in awe of what they can get out of these kids. They're just awesome. And then finally, next month at the Board Curriculum Committee meeting, we will be presenting the PACE survey, which is a survey given every 2 years looking at, alcohol and drug use at school, amongst other things. Nadine Carroll from the Karen Foundation, who works with our schools, will be presenting that to the board, and I will be there as well, in addition to Mrs. Lesage. And that's always an interesting conversation. So I encourage you to attend or to listen. Thank you.
Panayotic, could I just request that you send the details for that to us via email, just so that we all have kind of the dates in writing, the dates and times.
For the meeting itself? Or for
if you're encouraging people to attend.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Does anybody have anything else, any other questions or comments for Panayota or about Radnor Schools? All right, with that, we'll move on to the report from our Board of Commissioners liaison, Maggie.
Yeah, hello. I don't have much Board of Health related information to transmit. The only thing, and it's stretching it a little bit, is that there is going to be a township-wide pruning and or taking down of perilous trees happening over the summer in the township parks and rights of way. So you won't get hit by a branch, hopefully, and the trees will be healthier and safer. And otherwise, we've been in pretty much legal and conditional use issues, so.
Yes, there have been quite a few conditional use meetings that have come up. Does anybody have anything else for Maggie? All right, so then we'll move on to Delaware County. The Delaware County Office of Sustainability is hosting the 3rd annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference. That is on Thursday, May 30th at Widener University. Registration is required for that, and you can find that via the county's website. Also next month on June 6th is the Chester Bike Rodeo, so you can check that out at youthdevunited.org/bike-rodeo for more details, or you can just Google Chester Bike Rodeo. The organization is offering lessons for beginners, free helmets and bike locks, bike safety and maintenance instructions. Participants who register get a free t-shirt and a free meal. For anyone who doesn't cycle, there is also soccer and cornhole that is going to be there, and there will be a free bike raffle for families whose children qualify for reduced school lunch programs, so that's a wonderful opportunity for those children to be able to get a bicycle. And the organization is actively looking for bicycle donations. So for anybody who's, if they have an old bike that they're not using and they've been looking for someone who might want to use it, the county is looking for those donations. Radnor Fire Company, the only thing I'm aware of from them is that I saw something on their website about a gas leak at the high school. Paniota, I don't know if you had any comment on anything about that, but they responded to a report of a gas leak at a high school, but as far as I understand, it was all kind of taken care of.
It was very minor. I don't really have the details, but everyone was safe and there was no issue to follow up with.
All right. So with that, we will move on to presentations and programs, and we'll start with our student presentations. Before we start with the presentations, do our students have any updates on college acceptances that they want to announce? I understand that some do.
I'll be attending Villanova.
Great.
And I'll also be staying relatively close. I'm going to UPenn in the city.
Awesome. And then Hayun doesn't have a microphone in front of her. I don't know if you wanted. WashU. Okay, great. So congratulations to all of our student interns. Those are all wonderful schools, and we will look forward to seeing everything that you guys accomplish in college. With that, I don't know, did Chloe, Finn, does anybody have a preference on who goes in what order? All right, so it looks like Chloe's gonna go first. So Ian, I think you have Chloe's presentation, if we can get that up.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Understanding the effects of sleep hygiene on social emotional health. My study sought to further expand the existing RTSD initiatives, the Student Wellness Study, and the Student Sleep and Healthy School Schedules. The RTSD Student Wellness and Student Sleep and Healthy School Schedules studies conducted in 2019 to 2020 found that a high percentage of students surveyed reported negative mood symptoms and insufficient sleep. While yes, the RHS sleep study shows that a high percentage of RHS students have poor sleep habits as well as higher rate of anxiety, depression, the link between these two variables have not yet been assessed. And my proposed study intended to examine whether there may be a relationship between these two variables by answering the question, what is the impact of sleep hygiene on the social and emotional well-being of adolescents, with the goal of making recommendations for appropriate sleep hygiene. Now I would like to discuss the importance of understanding sleep hygiene and sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is defined as an inadequate quantity or quality of sleep and encompasses voluntary as well as involuntary lack of sleep, including sleep disorders such as sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and parasomnia. While sleep deprivation can be caused by diseases as mentioned above, many times stress, school, work, and simply poor sleeping habits are to blame. In fact, it takes 4 nights to make up for 1 lost hour of sleep, according to a 2016 study on optimizing sleep. The recommended amount of uninterrupted hours of sleep for adolescents is between 7 and 9 hours a night, but the quality of sleep is also important. An occasional all-nighter might seem innocuous, but even acute sleep deprivation has serious consequences on physical functioning, such as sleep debt and disruption of circadian rhythms, as well as mental health, including depression and anxiety. So understanding sleep hygiene is a crucial part of maintaining physical health, immunity, and mental health. The sleep cycles one passes through must also be factored into determining whether an individual is getting enough sleep, meaning sleep that is restorative. When a person sleeps, they usually pass through 4 cycles of REM sleep, 3 stages of non-REM, and 1 stage of REM sleep that is between 90 to 120 minutes. This cycling is repeated several times throughout the typical sleep cycle, and if the person does not progress through these cycles, then there can be negative outcomes for the brain. As the sleeper moves through each stage of sleep, different chemicals in the brain are activated and deactivated that allow for recovery of brain functions. Specifically, the medial prefrontal cortex, insula, and orbitofrontal cortex and the subcortical region of the striatum are affected, all of which are implicated in many crucial neuropsychological tasks and higher level thinking. Therefore, due to poor sleep, the brain struggles to function properly. Neurons are not able to recuperate and become overworked, leading to subpar performance in cognitive abilities such as memory, reaction time, and processing speed. Sleep deprivation has been shown to disrupt both declarative and procedural memory by interfering with memory consolidation, the process by which a person builds and retains memories in conjunction with assessing information stored in memory when needed. Consequently, over a long period of time, sleep deprivation places the individual at higher risk for dementia and other forms of cognitive decline. A meta-analysis of more than 25 observational studies substantiated a considerably higher occurrence of Alzheimer's disease in sleep-deprived people. And what my study intends to examine is that sleep disruption can lead to the development of mental health disorders. The relationship between sleep and mental health disorders is complex, but we know for sure that poor sleep hygiene can exacerbate symptoms of depression, anxiety, and other diagnoses, as well as the other way around. Now I would like to go over the methodology of my research and study. The goals of my research were to establish a strength and direction of the relationship between sleep and mental health by completing 2 short surveys amongst the students at RHS grades 9 through 12, as well as to develop practical interventions to increase sleep and thereby have a positive impact on mood and or anxiety. Then I plan to distribute this information to administration and counselors who will be able to utilize these interventions with the students they work with who are expressing they're experiencing poor sleep and or mental health concerns. And here's the link to the survey that I created. Now I'm going to cover the results for the social emotional section of the survey. About 75% of the students agreed to some degree with feeling anxious, nervous, or on edge. About 55% of the students agreed to some degree with not being able to stop or control worrying. About 26% of the students agreed to worrying too much about different things. More than 50% of the students feel unhappy, sad, or down some of the time. About 60% of the students do not agree with losing interest in typical daily activities, while 31% somewhat agree. Approximately 70% of the students agreed to some degree with having difficulty getting started on tasks and assignments. About 57% of the students agreed to some degree with having difficulty completing tasks and assignments. And finally, about 70% of the students agreed to some degree with having difficulty concentrating on schoolwork. Now I will cover the results for the sleep hygiene section of the survey. About 46% of the students agreed to some degree with not having difficulty falling asleep, and this is very common with sleep deprivation and exhaustion, as it is common to fall asleep very quickly once you get into bed. And about 21% of the students agreed to some degree with not having difficulty staying asleep, and that is also common with sleep deprivation. Around 56% of the students disagreed with tossing and turning at night, meaning they have relatively no trouble falling asleep, which is again common with exhaustion. The majority agreed here, with 32% of the students wanting to sleep more even after waking up, with the next highest being 28% of the students often feeling this way. The majority of the students often or almost always felt sleepy even after waking up, which is the most common side effect of sleep deprivation, with 28% of the students feeling this way and 27% often feeling this way. Approximately 64% of the students agreed to some degree with not getting enough sleep at night. And the majority here, with 34% of the students, almost always would like to get more sleep each night. Finally, at the end of the survey, I asked the students which factor they believe contributed most to their sleep loss, if they had any. And as you can see, 472 students out of 693 that took the survey, which is approximately 79%, believed that academics such as homework and tests was the main contributing factor to their sleep loss. At the completion of the data collection period, the survey's questions were coded in order to quantify the responses and provide a score on each section of the survey, where the social and emotional section and the sleep habit section were graded separately to create yielding 2 variables. The total score on the social and emotional survey portion ranged from 8 to 32, and the total score on the sleep hygiene portion of the survey ranged from 7 to 8. And I would like to just quickly clarify that the score depended on the degree to which the student agreed with the various statements, with at no time being 1, some of the time being 2, often being 3, and always being 4. So that's why it was possible to score as high as 32 on the social emotional part with 8 questions, and it being possible to score as high as 28 on the sleep hygiene section with 7 questions. Next, the scores for each variable were entered into an Excel spreadsheet, and using SPSS statistical software and a Pearson correlation analysis was conducted. The results of the correlation are reported in the table below. So a correlation coefficient tells us that the relationship between the 2 variables, social, emotional well-being, and sleep hygiene, and the R value here is the correlation coefficient is 0.684. And this is a moderately strong correlation that establishes there is a close positive relationship between these 2 variables. R values can range from -1 to 1, and 0 being no relationship at all. And the closer to -1 the R value is, there is a strong negative relationship. While with my R value being closer to +1 shows that there's a strong positive relationship. Strong positive relationship, meaning as sleep problems increase, so do symptoms of anxiety and depression, and vice versa. While this is moderately strong correlation, it does not mean that is a causal relationship between mental health issues and poor sleep, as correlation does not equal causation. Because from looking at my p-value, which is here less than 0.01, it means that there is a 99.99% chance that the relationship here did not occur by chance, meaning that this is statistically significant data with meaning. For example, it does not indicate that mental health issues are the cause of sleep problems, nor does it mean that the poor sleep leads to development of disorders of depression and anxiety, although such claims are supported by previous research. which shows sleep deprivation can create changes in neurons that regulate mood. It is also important to note that the survey results show that mental health issues are not the primary reason students report as causing their sleep problems. Instead, the vast majority reported it was that academic demands and schoolwork were the culprit. Academic demands are the primary factor students identified as impacting sleep, which was nearly 79%. These academic demands are interfering with having proper sleep and leading to poor sleep hygiene. Poor sleep hygiene has a moderately strong correlation with mental health / social emotional well-being, as explained before, with the R value being 0.684. Taken together, these data points indicate that an integrated approach towards addressing social emotional issues in adolescence should include developing a plan to better manage academic demands and or possibly reduce academic demands along with modifying sleep habits. Ways in which we can mitigate the academic strain placed on students that cause sleep hygiene issues is having the school counselors intervene. School counselors can initiate motivational interviewing with current habits and environments, identifying specific symptoms and sources of sleep deprivation, implementing cognitive behavioral therapy approaches to address stress and tension, providing education on healthy habits for sleep hygiene, and offering support with working towards goals. Then I would like to end with some strategies for better sleep hygiene, which in conjunction with the help from school counselors, I really believe could make a difference for students at Radnor. So I would recommend maintaining a regular bedtime each night to reinforce circadian rhythms, refrain from using digital screens 1 to 2 hours before bedtime, which is a struggle for students who are working on homework right up until they go to bed, and screens are known to disrupt circadian rhythms. I would also recommend to use do not disturb settings to limit tech disruptions during sleep hours, implementing screen time limits on digital devices to reduce use throughout the day, seeking out natural sunlight by sitting in a window or just walking outside. Consider reducing caffeine intake to 1 cup a day, refraining from consuming caffeinated beverages in the evening or at bedtime, and documenting sleep routines and disruptions to identify patterns. Thank you.
Chloe, I want to give you a certificate of appreciation from the Radnor Board of Health.
Do we want to do the presentation together so we can have everybody kind of take a picture together?
Sure, if I can.
Yeah, you can have the
But this was
certificate now if you'd like.
This was absolutely excellent.
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation and work.
Does anybody have any questions for Chloe about anything? I will open with a comment that I think we're getting a little bit of a running theme here from the students that despite the improvements that have been made, they still want more time to sleep.
Was there anything that surprised you about the results of your study, or was it kind of as you had anticipated?
I did expect to see a relatively strong correlation, but definitely looking at the second half of the sleep hygiene, just seeing how high the percentages were, it was very surprising. Yeah.
Can I jump in for a second? Okay. So, Chloe, excellent job as always. You've always, done such a fabulous job in anything you do. I think the district has spent a lot of time, looking at this. First of all, the time change that we had, 5 years ago now, 6 years ago now. So I think that has really made a big difference, at least, the feedback that I was always getting from students. But I think we've also looked at other things like the homework survey, right, to see where can we really take a look and pare things down if necessary to make sure that homework is meaningful and it's not keeping you up late at night for no reason. So I think we're constantly reassessing things and looking at the data to make sure that we're doing right by our students. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And I can give one piece of input about the screens before bedtime thing, which is one thing I always used to do was I would have the last thing on my homework schedule be to do my my textbook reading. So if I had AP US history or whichever class it was that had kind of the most heavy textbook reading for that night, make that the last thing you do at night, and then you're not on the screen for that. And And I did pretty well in AP US history, so maybe that works. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic presentation, and I also wanted to recognize, since I made the announcement about Mother's Day being this month, that your mom's here tonight. So Chloe, you did a wonderful job this year, and I guess you're really still going to be around Radnor since you're going to Villanova. Maybe since you'll still be a Radnor resident, if a board seat, we're expecting at least one to open up in the near future. If you want a real board seat and you're still around, we'll be happy to have you.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else for Chloe? All right, and then later, like I said, we can take pictures with the student interns with their certificates and the mentors. All right, Finn, I guess you're up.
Should be 100%.
We'll see. We might lose it just for that slide. You might have to like redo the screen share if it doesn't have the window up. But if it goes back to the PowerPoint after that.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to conduct this research. It was very exciting to learn about my town in a way that I had not considered before. I also want to quickly mention that these past couple days I have not felt my best, so if at any time you need me to project or speak a little bit closer to the microphone, just let me know, because my throat is a little sore, but thank you. So my project was on bikes, accessibility and safety in Radnor. I'll begin by just going over a brief run-through of the presentation. I'll start with the purpose and issue at hand. Then I will go into an overview of a map that I created on the existing infrastructure and bike racks in Radnor. Then I will identify who is in charge of each different rack that is on the map, along with applications for funding by this board where that focus can be put towards. And I will end with general recommendations for this board. So let's begin by just discussing quickly the purpose and issue of this presentation. So my main research fell into an assessment of the existing bike racks in Radnor, which all that research is reflected in the map that I will be showing soon. And the purpose of this research was to identify ways to maximize the safety and accessibility of bicycle infrastructure in Radnor. So to do so and to understand the need for new bicycle infrastructure, I thought it would be important to just look at where we are right now. So in Radnor, there is absolutely an interest in biking. However, that interest is not adequately met with the same amount of infrastructure. So there's a thriving community of bikers in Radnor, but there isn't the ability to find racks or other pieces of infrastructure in order to effectively and efficiently act on those interests. Also in Radnor, the benefits of biking are widely understood. So there's not only a recreational interest, but people are largely aware of the public health and more individual wellness benefits of biking. However, again, there isn't the systems of bike racks that are available to meet that interest. The vast majority of racks are located around very public areas, for example, libraries, parks, train stations, schools. And there are existing walking and biking trails, like the Radnor Trail. However, in more commercial areas, that there isn't that same level of infrastructure. There are a vast amount of public health benefits for biking, some of which include physical activity and health and wellness benefits, the relief of stress, recreational benefits, environmental benefits, benefits for students, and efficiency, cost, and time benefits. And each of these benefits will be discussed further on an individual slide. So a study by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health found that biking was associated with a decreased risk for cardiovascular disease. This same research found that individuals who choose to commute with a bicycle as opposed to another form of public transportation are at a decreased risk of obesity, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, and high blood glucose. On a more mental health level, biking has been associated with an increase of self-confidence, and also it is an opportunity to socialize and experience the outdoors with others. So it not only leads to a sense of community and thus belonging, but also you're able to find more about yourself and the town that you belong in or the city that you belong in. The same study that I mentioned before found that biking seems to recapture a sense of childhood joy and freedom. And although this is on perhaps more a psychological level, I thought it was a worthy inclusion in this presentation because I am of the opinion that the Radnor Board of Health should consider these things of value in that individuals being able to experience the joys and freedoms associated with childhood are more likely to be happy and mentally stable. Biking has also been found to have benefits in mental health and recreation, as I mentioned before. Like previously mentioned, it creates a sense of community. It leads to a decrease in depression symptoms. That same research found that. And also noise pollution, which was not something I originally had considered, but compared to other forms of public transportation, biking is much quieter. And so that leads to a better experience for both the rider and those around the rider. As for the environment, a UCLA study found that choosing a bike over a car for just one day reduces the average person's carbon emissions by transportation by 67%. And this is important given that many believe climate change is one of, if not the biggest health threats of the century. Biking also leads to cleaner air for similar reasons. And I also wanted to note that we should consider the future generations and that this Board of Health should make it a priority that those that come after us are also able to experience the same things that we are, and one way to ensure the safety and accessibility of those future generations is to promote bike usage. The next section for public health benefits focuses on students and adolescents. Partly because I am myself a student, and this presentation is oriented for student interns, and also because Radnor has such great public school systems that I thought it was a worthy inclusion. So like mentioned before, biking creates a sense of community, which is important for everyone, but especially important for adolescents who are learning about themselves and the world around them. Biking also is linked to skill acquisition, which can lead to an increased self-confidence and identity. And this goes very hand in hand with what Chloe presented on. Biking leads to improved energy and sleep, which we just learned about is wonderful for students. And the last section is efficiency. For the rider on an individual level, biking is pretty low in cost and time. And then on an implementation level for a town or a city to implement biking infrastructure, as opposed to other forms of public transportation, a bike rack or even a bike sharing system, which I will get into a little bit later, is relatively low in maintenance costs and time. Now I will go into the map that I mentioned before, which outlines the existing bike racks in Radnor for just one small part of town. Before I do so, I just want to briefly go over the key on this map. It's also on the Google map itself. But anything that you see in blue indicates a single bike rack. Green are 2 loops. Purple is 3. And orange is 4. The vast majority of the ones I found in my assessment are the double bike rack. And that seems to be the most popular option in town. So I think this should still work. So like I mentioned before, at the top you can see this key. This is the general area of town that the general area of town that I looked at. Oh, sorry, I don't know what I keep doing. I'll just leave it like that. Okay, so I looked from mainly the Wayne Square area to around the Wawa White Dog area. And I would encourage that further research and an assessment of a larger area of town might be an important decision. But I would say that in just driving around, this assessment seems to be reflective of Radnor in general. So I'll begin with these two stations here by the train station. There are two double bike racks on either side of the train station, so an inbound and outbound side. Then here by East Lancaster Avenue, that's right outside of the Wheelhouse, Vanilla Bean, those stores, there is a single bike rack. Then over here by the Memorial Library, there are two, both outside by the front entrance, and these again are double bike racks. Then down here by the middle school, I located ones with 4 loops by the bus loop and then the main entrance of the middle school. And then over here, this is St. Catherine of Siena. While I was doing my assessment, I actually could not locate the bike rack that was said to be here, but on their website and other documents, it was reported that there was a bike rack. So I wanted to include it on the map, but just note that I could not actually find it when I visited. And then finally, at Rite Aid, there is one right by the entrance, and that is a triple bike rack. So if you just look more generally, you can see that there really is a lack of infrastructure in bike racks, especially in this commercial area. We have in more very public areas that you would expect, they're pretty well accounted for, and that is important considering school and work habits. A lot of people who are going into the city might use a bike at the train station, and then students might use it at the middle school or library. However, in the area by the businesses, there really is an absence of bike racks, and this map does a great job of showing that. Okay. So now that we understand how the bike racks and biking infrastructure looks like in Radnor today, I'd like to go briefly over who is in charge of these bike racks. And I believe that this information, along with where the bike racks are located, can help inform the placement of future bike racks if that is something the board decides to encourage. So what I found is that the bike racks around the library, parks, schools, are all very similar in that they are owned by the township. However, the ones by the train station are operated by SEPTA, and that is something SEPTA prides itself on. I found on their website they like to create a micro-mobile network, as they called it, so individuals can use their bikes and then also go on the train, and that's a harmonious relationship. So this information is just to show who is in charge of the existing infrastructure, and that might inform decisions about the placement of others. So now for, I would say, the most interesting part of the presentation is what we can do in the future and how we can help promote biking in Radnor. So I believe the main goal for the future should be, and has always really been, to increase the safety of Radnor. And I believe one way that we can do that in relation to biking is by increasing the accessibility. I believe that if people are able to easily and safely access bikes, it will decrease any risks associated with biking if they're able to access a rack without much hassle. I also believe that taking note of the existing infrastructure I mentioned in the map is also important, and that making the public aware of opportunities with these bike racks, along with educational opportunities for biking, would be important, and that kind of ties back to what we were mentioning at the beginning of this meeting, at least with that presentation on bike education. So it's great to see that that's already something in motion. This section, I also want to touch briefly on my trip to Philadelphia to visit the Indigo warehouse, and Indigo is a bike sharing system in Philadelphia that is owned by the City of Philadelphia, operated by Bicycle Transit Systems, and sponsored by the Independence Blue Cross. And for those of you who don't know, bike sharing allows people in cities or towns to basically find a bike at a certain rack. Some are dockless, but Indigo operates with stations, and you can pick up a bike at a station, go wherever you need to go, and find another station to deposit that bike. So I found that bike sharing, and I believe this information is important, even if bike sharing isn't something that Radnor decides to do, because I think a lot of this could be applied to just bike racks or other biking infrastructure. But I found that at least with bike sharing, it's a very interdisciplinary process in that you need to be well equipped with computers, bikes, and also mechanical things. A lot of workers at the warehouse specialized in repairs. There are also 3 different types of bikes that are in the city right now, operated by Indigo: the 0.0, 2.0, and electric e-bikes. And Indigo stations are powered by solar panels or by the buildings that they are outside of. There's often connections with those buildings. And this relationship between buildings or neighborhoods, or really just areas of the city, and Indigo is something that is at the heart of bike sharing, or at least Indigo's version of bike sharing. And they believe that a relationship between their users and also the community with bikes is important. Here is an inside look that I took of the Indigo warehouse, and you can see that this area right here is the 2.0 bike fleet, which is the largest component of their current bike fleet. E-bikes are the vast majority of what people choose to ride. It's the most popular option. I actually had the opportunity to ride an e-bike when I visited, and I can definitely understand why it is the most popular option. The ease is just, it's wonderful. And so these are just kind of a look at what it looks like inside the warehouse. Another aspect of Indigo's mission is the repairs, and they can repair bikes or stations either by sending vans out to pick up a bike and take it back to the warehouse, or by doing field repairs where they would use a bicycle carriage like this and bring equipment or spare parts with them to a location, fix the bike without ever having to take it back to the warehouse. And this process is open 365 days a year, except when the city calls an emergency, usually a weather emergency. And the final aspect of Indigo that I thought was most encouraging, for me personally at least, was their efforts towards sustainability. So on multiple occasions, Indigo has taken equipment or even bikes from other companies or cities that that company or city no longer needs, and they have branded it with the signature blue IBX color and used it and sent it out into the city of Philadelphia. So you can see in this picture on the left, there are these red stations. This is where you would pay. That are not branded Indigo, but while I was visiting, they were actually in the process of branding them for Indigo and taking them out into the city. And another example of them doing this was San Antonio City. They had decided to transfer completely over to e-bikes, so they no longer wanted regular bikes. But then they just ended up having all these regular bikes that they had nothing to do with. And so Indigo and the city of Philadelphia took them on pennies on the dollar and created that mutual beneficial relationship where another city no longer needs them, city of Philadelphia can use them for much cheaper of a price. In 2023, Indigo broke 1 million trips, and they also partner with the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia to promote educational material on bicycling, and so I thought that was something important that we could consider too on educating the people of Radnor and possibly modeling it off after Indigo's own educational. And I also believe that Indigo's consideration of commuter patterns, school and work patterns, and attractions in the city of Philadelphia is also applicable to this Board of Health. I believe that when we are determining future bike racks, looking towards popular spots that have not already been covered, and also addressing school and work and commuter patterns, that could be important. Obviously, if you look at the map, a lot of school and work patterns are already well accounted for, but I think there is still room to grow. And Indigo also works with neighborhoods and the actual individuals who live in the areas that the bike racks and bike stations are being put into, because they believe this will prevent Indigo as kind of a force from becoming a predatory force. A lot of people associate bike sharing with gentrification, and Indigo hopes that speaking directly to the individuals and ensuring that every bike station is designed at least location-wise differently will ensure that that does not occur. And I believe that even as small as bike racks, talking to the people of Radnor is a worthy idea. Again, I think we should look towards activities, buildings, parks, and other popular spots in Radnor when determining our placement of our own infrastructure. The proximity to existing biking infrastructure, like those mentioned on the maps, is also important. And I also wanted to mention that as for bike sharing, in 2023, the Lower Merion Commissioners approved a resolution for its staff members to apply for I think it was $150,000 grant to bring Indigo's services to the City Avenue area. And I just believe that's evidence that bike sharing can be brought to other areas. My trip to Indigo also allowed me to understand that even with things like bike racks that aren't as grand as bike sharing systems, there is going to be pushback with the risk that some bike racks might take up spaces, that parking spots could be put in, and just overall congestion. I think that the way that Indigo can anticipate these pushbacks is something that could also help this Board of Health. And I've already mentioned dockless stations and that Indigo operates with station-based programs, but I believe that if bike sharing was a opportunity for this town, station-based programs might be more effective in that dockless are much less organized and lead to much more congestion, just leaving your bike or scooter wherever. Having a station designated for a bike is much easier to organize. And finally, I've mentioned some of this in detail, but I just want to end with some general recommendations. So I believe that additional bike racks should be established in this town with consideration for existing bike racks. I also think that a map or identification service for this infrastructure would be a good idea. It would encourage people to plan out where they want to bike, and I think that would just encourage biking in general. On the equity and accessibility front, I think bike sharing should be at least considered or talked about. It is much harder to implement in a small town than, say, a city, but even if bike sharing cannot be implemented in full, the principles and ideas behind it, I think, can follow. And finally, more educational programs or bike-themed events could help promote bike usage and bike education. Lastly, I would say, if possible, we could consider aesthetics. This past day, actually, I was in Avalon, and beach towns are much more conducive to biking, but most bike racks in Radnor are curved, and I think that we should continue with that. I believe that are much more nice to look at, and I just think that the wave here is a good example of how aesthetics, colors, that all can play into public health and that idea. Thank you so much for your attention, and here's my works cited.
Thank you very much, Finn. Just a quick point of order. Maggie, we don't have to formally take a vote to extend the meeting, right? We just keep going until we adjourn. Okay. Does anybody have questions or comments for Finn?
I thought it was excellent.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions,
Yeah.
or actually just a fantasy.
Uh-huh.
If we were to say, okay, let's make Radnor like a model township where it's completely bikeable. I guess the question would be, how do we get walking pedestrian trails on roads like Newtown Road, Radnor-Chester Road, Conestoga? Because I think one impediment to biking, which you've touched upon, is just the safety of like biking throughout the township, like biking to school. And the hills would probably make it so we would need e-bikes here. So I wonder if if it can be done. I mean, it would be amazing.
Right.
But I wonder if there would be enough demand for it. And then if we could get basically pedestrian trails throughout the entire township.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it would be difficult to decide if there was enough demand for it. But I think that there is at least a certain level of interest for just a bikeable town.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, like you said, it's a fantasy, but I think, we have a great Radnor Trail, and if we could possibly use some of that and base that off of future trails, talk to people around the
Yeah.
neighborhood and see what they want, I think it could possibly be started.
And I'll just make a comment about the Radnor Trail. One of the benefits of that, if you bike on the Radnor Trail to get to wherever you're going, is you do not hit red lights.
True.
Does anybody have anything else for Finn?
I have one quick question. Sorry, over here. In your experience looking at the bike racks, I mean, I don't know how many times you went around or just did a basic survey. Were they full or were they empty? I mean, did it look like we needed more bike racks where they are now?
Yeah, when I went by the train stations, they were completely full. By the library, I believe there was one in the two, and by the middle school, I went when it was after school, so those were empty.
Thanks.
Also, I'd be interested different times of year as well, because I think you did a lot of this assessment in like December,
Yeah,
January,
December.
February, right? So I would imagine, June, July, August, we might see more usage.
Sounds like SEPTA might need to pick up their act a little bit, though, and provide more.
This is maybe more a question for Maggie than Finn, but one thing I might suggest is whether the township, as new apartments or sort of multi-unit buildings are put in, whether that's a bike rack of any size is something that can be attached as a condition when those get in for approval. Because as someone who lives in an apartment, I know the apartment I was living in a year ago, I had a small balcony, so I could have put the bike there, but the one I'm living in now, there really isn't anywhere to put it. There really wouldn't be anywhere to put a bike if I wanted to have one. So even though I'm right on the Radnor Trail and it would be sort of pretty convenient. So I don't know whether that's something the township can kind of keep in the back of its collective mind moving forward.
I think it's an excellent idea. We can certainly encourage it in some of the conditional use things. It could be a condition, but most land development, you can encourage it.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else for Finn? All right. Well, congratulations again. That was a wonderful presentation, and we've enjoyed having you as an intern on the board this year. Thanks so much, Finn.
Thank you so much.
And I'll just point out because we're getting ready to sort of send out the applications for next year, for any of the students who did not get picked last year, both Chloe and Finn had applied in a prior year and were not selected. They both took me up on the opportunity to get feedback on their applications, and then both ended up joining this year. And actually, that's true for Hayun as well. So that's a little bit of encouragement for them to consider reapplying the following year. With that, if in terms of that piece of the student presentations next year's, I'm working on that with Lisa Bannister as well as Drew, who are both not here in person right now, so we can continue working offline on getting that out. The next presentation on the list is the oral health program. Bob's not here, so we can skip past that. Quick follow-up on, I want to thank the Radnor Township Police Department for coming and presenting last month. I understand there are some additional congratulations in order because Isabel had that baby 2 days after presenting. So congratulations to her on being a new mom. We do have, I think, Maggie, one of the other applicants who was not selected is currently filling in for her, and then there's a hope that as we kind of keep going and expand, there might be potentially room for
Add
both
to
of
the
them.
force, yeah. Yeah, Jessica
as-
is there now, and she's doing a
Right.
terrific job.
So, so again, thank you to Isabel and for all of the Radnor officers and for our chief of police for coming and presenting that. We're very excited about that community support unit. I think it's a wonderful thing to have for the township. And just a quick follow-up on some of the other prior presentations. Our March presentation for National LGBTQ Health Awareness Week is now at over 6,400 views on YouTube. That's and the presentation from January is over 1,100, so that's over 7,500 between those two. So we're very happy that these programs are resonating with the community in such a strong way that people seem to be sharing them and other people watching them, because we certainly don't have a marketing budget that's getting everybody to watch. So, so thank you to everybody in the community who came out for those and who's been supporting those. Some other things that I wanted to introduce. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I'm intending on stepping down next month, but I've still been busy at work trying to get some more things on the schedule before I do. We have a Heather King, who came actually to the January meeting. She was the Radnor resident who came kind of towards the end and stepped up to the microphone, is interested in sponsoring a recovery house field day type of event. We are still working out a date on that, but that's something that I wanted to kind of put in front of the board as a potential thing that we may be sponsoring sort of sometime over the summer. It's not going to be during a meeting or at the end of a meeting like some of our other things have been, but it would be sort of a township-sponsored activity. Heather operates a foundation that supports multiple recovery houses that are in the suburban area. Radnor kind of happens to be in the middle of where a lot of the different houses she supports are, so it's sort of a location that made sense. I also had some interest from SNAP, which is I'm forgetting what the acronym stands for at this exact second. But it's a, give me 1 second, I'm just gonna, because it's gonna bother me if I don't say it. The Survivors Network of those abused by priests. They're interested in presenting sort of, it's, just to be clear, it's not just anything to do with priests. They've also worked with survivors of things like the Boy Scouts and some other groups, and basically they're interested in talking to the community about sort of what communities need to be aware of when it comes to things like child abuse. We did, unfortunately about a year ago have that article that came out about things that were going on at Valley Forge Military Academy. So I thought that it was something that could be useful, and they were interested in coming to present in June. So that would be after our June meeting. And then I did also reconnect with Lou DeSanto, who's a Radnor grad and also works with the Karen Treatment Centers. And he's interested in coming to present at our September meeting. So that would be after the September meeting, he would come and present. And he would be talking about overcoming addiction, kind of giving his perspective as a Radnor High School graduate on what addiction recovery looks like. And so that's something that I wanted to kind of put in front of the board as well. And then the last one that I have started working on is from the Glide Foundation, which is an organization that was established by a family that runs a local dental practice in the area. They provide financial assistance to disabled students, and they're interested in providing some community education about accessibility and things around accessibility. They're founded in honor of the memory of Mark Bookman, who was a disability advocate. He was an American who at the time he died was living full-time in Tokyo. Working on a presentation date for them. The topic I already talked about would be accessibility. And that foundation is also premiering a documentary called Mark, A Call to Action. That's going to be having its U.S. premiere at the Bryn Mawr Film Institute right here in Bryn Mawr. So for anybody who's interested in seeing the U.S. premiere of a documentary about accessibility, that's going to be at the Bryn Mawr Film Institute Wednesday, June 19th. Does anybody else have any kind of new proposals for anything they've been working on or that they wanted to kind of get out into the ether? All right, so with that, we'll move on to a discussion of community infectious disease. David?
Thanks, Alex. I'll try and keep this short since we're running late. There are a couple of updates on two of the big infectious diseases. One, on COVID, you will hear a lot of talk about KP2 and 1.1 and FLIRT, which are the new variants that are in the Omicron line and seem to be replacing earlier Omicron variants. There is no evidence at this point of any new virulence. The data on COVID are pretty poor at this point. They're not well collected. You're stuck with hospital admissions and deaths, wastewater, and percent positivity of emergency room visits for COVID, which last year at this time were 3% and this year are 0.3%. So everything is moving in the right direction. However, CDC published that there may be a summer bump. That's probably based on the fact that there have been summer bumps many previous seasons. I read through the data. I couldn't figure out exactly where they were coming up with evidence for a potential summer bump, but it is an hypothesis. All models are wrong. Some are useful. At this point, if you are an individual who has significant risk of getting COVID, you need to pay attention. There was a study out that suggests that metformin, a drug that's been used for 40 years for the treatment of diabetes, is beneficial in those individuals who start early in the course of COVID in terms of decreasing viral shed, decreasing emergency visits, decreasing duration of symptoms, and decreasing severity. And then you are also going to hear an awful lot have heard and will continue to hear an awful lot of kerfuffle about H5N1, which is the avian flu or influenza A. There's a lot of influenza A out there in cattle, remembering that cattle and pigs are one of the ways in which things get from one part of the zoonote to humans. There is still no evidence of human-to-human transfer. There is your milk supply at the moment may actually have contained, if you look carefully enough, fragments of H5N1. But pasteurized milk remains safe. Your milk supply remains safe. Raw milk was never safe and remains unsafe. And it's something that we should keep an eye on. There have been outbreaks of avian flu in 2002, 3, 6, 7, 14, 15, 17. At this point, there's still never been evidence of a human-to-human transmission of influenza A. That would be the bad thing, and it could happen because, as I say, cows and pigs have an immune system that allows for the mixing of strains that are restricted to avian with strains that are not restricted to avian, and as a consequence, the emergence of a bad flu could occur that way. At this point, I hope none of this was anxiety-provoking. It was designed to diminish anxiety, that right now there's really not much going on in infectious diseases, and I'll finish with that.
Thank you for that, David. Ian, do we have, I think Hayun sent in a slide about the number of measles cases. Do you have that, and can we get that up on the screen?
Thanks, Hayun, for doing that. I hadn't really intended to go on anymore about measles. The story is still the same. It was nearly obliterated. It's no longer nearly obliterated as a consequence of poor information about measles vaccine. And I strongly recommend that that people observe the recommendations for inoculation and for isolation in the event of exposure to measles.
Okay. Yep, thank you. So I would like to briefly talk about the current situation of measles cases in U.S. as it relates to public health. So measles is a highly contagious airborne disease, and it can lead to death of unvaccinated children due to respiratory and neurologic complications. And as you see in the graph, the measles cases more than doubled in 2024 compared to 2023. And the causes of the spike of measles cases can be attributed to the lack of or a decrease of vaccination and also traveling abroad, which makes people to bring measles from foreign countries. And the increase of measles cases can be linked with the decrease of COVID cases, since people started to travel more across countries due to the improvements of how we deal with COVID. And the solution for the measles cases can be through high-level vaccination, since it can spread widely across human population. Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So this is one of the things that we talked about having social media interns do, moving forward as we look to next year, having one potentially for a full year, is having graphs and things like this put together for our presentations. So again, just what this graph is showing is that we already have more cases for this year than we did for all of 2023. It's now the largest number of measles cases that we've had in the U.S. since 2019. And again, as David said, this is a vaccine-preventable disease.
And as Hyun said, it is probably the most infectious virus known to man, and we don't see people dying of measles anymore because we've come close to obliterating. We will see people with lifelong neurologic deficits and death if we allow this to continue.
We don't see them dying in the U.S. because
in the
of
US,
it.
correct.
Thanks, Hyun. All right, moving on to old business. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I can because I had some follow-up conversations with some people about some of the water quality issues that had been raised, so I just wanted to make clear what that discussion was. So the water quality in Radnor meets federal standards. Well, potentially there's more than one organization, but there's one organization I'm aware of that was brought to my attention that has research that suggests that the federal standards for water quality are too lenient. And they have identified that in the water supply that we get here in Radnor, there are some contaminants that are above what they think should be the federal acceptable levels, but they are underneath what the current federal acceptable levels are. The water in Radnor is, not dangerous. There's not like you're going to take one drink of water and get sick from it or anything, but if you're drinking water all the time, which hopefully everybody should be, a reverse osmosis filter will give you the best quality water if that's something that you want to invest in. So that's just the clarification I wanted to give about that. Does anybody have anything else about water that they wanted to say? Very quickly under new business, I'm also just going to say air quality, which is something that we've talked about before, has started to rear its ugly head in Minnesota. They're already getting smokes from some Canadian wildfires. That's something we dealt with a lot of last summer. So when you're checking the weather, in addition to rain or shine, and in addition to the temperature, you may want to take a look at those air quality readings. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up under new business? All right, so with that, we will move on to public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to make public comment? Okay.
Yeah, whoops. Yeah, I'd just like to make some comment.
Can you start by your name and your address? You don't have to give the house number, but just the street.
My Angela Rance, Hamilton Road. So I've got the measles.
And that's Wayne?
Bryn Mawr.
Okay.
So at the meeting in March, Dr. Simmons stated some what I regard as inaccurate information and that does not serve the interests of parents and students of this school district. I understand I'm given a different view here. Vaccines are a diverse class of medical interventions, with some being slightly effective but unsafe, while others have proven to be defective or unsafe. It's seriously inaccurate to claim all vaccines are categorically safe and effective. In fact, under oath, Catherine Edwards, regarded as the grandmother of vaccinology and the expert that most drug companies rely on to study their vaccines, was forced to admit that no studies have ever been done that can determine whether vaccines, as they are given on the childhood schedule, do or do not cause autism. I challenge Dr. Simmons to produce the studies he claims to show efficacy and safety.
Excuse me. Sorry, you need to address your comments to the board chair.
Oh, to the board chair. To produce the studies that you claim show efficacy and safety for the totality of the many vaccines on the childhood schedule. Historically, most vaccines have demonstrated toxicity and caused harm through various mechanisms like contamination, unintended immune responses, contracting the targeted disease from the vaccine itself, or other unknown causes. Since the 1986 Act passed after manufacturers were going to stop making vaccines as there were too many lawsuits they had to pay out for injuries and deaths, vaccine manufacturers have immunity from product liability lawsuits based on the government authorities recognizing vaccines as unavoidably unsafe products. They have not been thoroughly through scientifically rigorous testing using true placebos in any trials advocating their use. Since 1986, the number of vaccines on the childhood-adolescent schedule has increased from 7 to 21 by 23. The rate of autism and other disease conditions have likewise increased since then. Only a minority of vaccines on the current schedule, like measles and chickenpox, are capable of providing herd immunity, albeit controversially, as the immunity derived from vaccination is not as robust and long-lasting as that from overcoming the natural disease. There's claims that autism and MMR vaccination are coincidental, and there's no documented proof of a link between the two. But if you substitute the word brain damage with autism, search the vaccine injury court decisions, you will find many tens of millions of dollars of awards for damage to the brain to the lucky families who made it through to this unconstitutional court. Many thousands do not. The waning efficacy of the MMR has been acknowledged by the CDC for nearly 2 decades, and research has shown the measles vaccine cannot be boosted. Measles outbreaks occur in both vaccinated and unvaccinated populations, and vaccine shedding can be an initiator. There are proven and safe treatments for measles, and these are cheap and readily available. If an outbreak of measles is a serious concern, public health communication should at least give some attention to them and not try to scare up MMR vaccination rates with a drug intervention that states in its package insert that it may cause encephalitis and seizures. All vaccines cannot justify population-wide mandates, as each child has individual susceptibilities depending on genetics and other environmental and social factors. The pharmaceutical industry wields enormous influence through lobbying, advertising, and funding via grants to the medical profession. They fund medical groups, politically motivated advocacy organizations, and they incentivize and reward doctors. And to ignore this influence does a great disservice to the independence and integrity of the medical profession and to the health and well-being of society as a whole. There's a book which details all the studies about measles, all the science, goes right through it. By Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's called The Measles Book, if you'd like to read that. That's my comment.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to make public comment?
My name's Christy on West Wayne Avenue. Do we know who is healthier, the vaccinated or the unvaccinated? We don't know the answer to that. And all the people that are labeled anti-vaxxers, we simply want to know the safety and efficacy of the vaccine program. And the pharmaceutical companies and our government agencies have never done those studies, which would confirm, who's healthier, the vaccinated or the unvaccinated. And since our government agencies haven't done this yet, these two gentlemen wrote a book, or compiled a book, Vax Unvaxxed, Let the Science Speak. It's Brian Hooker, who has over 70 peer-reviewed scientific publications and over 20 papers covering the epidemiology of vaccine injury, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Chief Litigation Counsel for Children's Health Defense, and he's written many books, of which I've read several of them, and they're like 500 pages long with 100 references and tons of science. But these guys have compiled studies, 100 studies, in peer-reviewed literature that consider vaccinated versus unvaccinated populations. Each study is analyzed, and health differences among infants, children, and adults who have been vaccinated and those who have not are presented and put into context. And I'm just going to flip a page to 3 of them to share. The odds of autism with the mumps, measles, rubella vaccine before and after age 36 months of age. When it's given prior to 36 months of age, there's a 3.86 times greater incidence of autism. The relative risk of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis after measles vaccine. The unvaccinated, the vaccinated have 3 times greater risk of Crohn's disease than the unvaccinated, and 2.5 times greater ulcerative colitis. And finally, this one kind of blew me away. The hazard ratio for mortality of unvaccinated versus vaccinated with the DTP vaccine. So this is years later, they went back and looked at all the people who had had the vaccines as like 6 months olds, I think. There was 5 times greater rate of death, mortality, if you were vaccinated in all children, 10 times greater in girls, 3.9 times greater in boys. And that was in Guinea-Bissau, Africa. The whole book basically says that you might not get the disease that you've been vaccinated for, but you have a huge chance of having all sorts of other problems. And maybe this is a clue as to why we're the most unhealthy country of all developed countries in the world. Chronic disease is off the charts. Autism rates, boys are now like 1 in 20. I think we should be talking about that instead of 58 people having measles. And we'd like to give you a copy of this book as well. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to make public comment at this time? Is there any, I know we're already a little bit over time, but if there is any member of the board that would like to make some additional comment, I'd be happy to make a little bit of time for that.
The only comment I'd make is I was misquoted. I didn't say all vaccines are safe. I think every intervention needs to be evaluated for the potential risks and benefits, and you're entitled to your opinions.
Thank you very much. Is there any other board comment? All right. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. And then if the student interns want to take some pictures here, we want to get pictures with you and the student intern mentors.
Yeah, not if you want to, you're required, sorry.
And also, Chloe, I do also want to say Lisa was very disappointed that she couldn't be here. Unfortunately, her daughter's lacrosse team advanced to the playoffs. So